Hello, I'm Ila Sharavinsky and you're watching TVP World Talks, where every word matters. A suspected operative of the Russian GRU has been extradited from Bosnia and Herzegovina to Poland. Investigators in Warsaw believe he played a pivotal role in the Russian airline bombing plot involving explosive or combustible parcels. Poland's government believes that by having the Russian arrested, it might have foiled a major scheme involving acts of state-sponsored terrorism. Joining us now is Paulina Piasecka, Terrorism Research Center of the Collegium Civitas. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Welcome. It's a great pleasure to be here.
So let's begin by discussing the scheme itself. What did it involve specifically?
Well, actually, I think the most important part that we should focus on is not only the goal of the plot, which was, as you have rightly said, foiled, but also the very precise preparation that did involve testing the transfer routes for the packages and packets that might have involved and did, in fact, in some cases involve the incendiary materials that were supposed to the point of full realization of the goal, serve as the transfer measures and transport routes to deliver either incendiary or explosive devices to the targets that might be of critical importance from the point of view of the internal stability, safety of the critical infrastructure of the state, which is actually one of the most important tools of the hybrid warfare, the part of which we unfortunately seem to be today.
So what the idea was, essentially, was about sending these parcels from Central and Eastern Europe into the United States or other Western nations. What was the danger specifically in this case? Could this have resulted in multiple casualties, for example, if this plan was carried out to the full extent?
That's one possible goal of an operation like that. But what we must keep in mind is also the fact that there might be secondary goals behind the simple act of delivering a dangerous package to a specific selected target. If the point that was targeted was an element of the critical infrastructure, and if it was the functioning of the critical infrastructure that would be either harmed or stopped or maybe even interrupted for the time being, that could influence not only directly the lives and health of the people that would be within the reach of the explosive of incendiary device, but also further on the people who would be harmed because the state would not be able to deliver further on the basic functions and basic services that the state is providing to the citizens, including providing the electric energy, health services, or maybe clean water.
So the broader goal of sabotage, of course, is to disrupt the ordinary operations of the state. Now, why did this scheme ultimately did not materialize? Was it because, to some extent, we've managed actually to interrupt these proceedings, or were there other factors involved as well?
Well, this thing that's happening, it is a game. It is a game between the services, and right now the services that are involved are the combined powers of the services of the Western world that do act also within the framework of something that's called SIGINT, so Signals Intelligence Alliance, against the Russian operatives under the flag of, as you have rightly mentioned, GRU, so the Russian military intelligence service. And so the multiple factors that come into play in counteracting the threats from the special operations operatives of the world does include, quite obviously, the special operations of police, of the counterintelligence services, of intelligence services, but also, and I think this is a very important part to stress, a deep cooperation and information exchange between the partner services of the world, because what needs to be also stressed, those operations that do target the elements of the critical infrastructure or the elements of the national security system, they quite often involve dealing with confidential information and the amount of trust and the amount of cooperation that is necessary for the international cooperation of the services is just amazing. So it's not only who wins at the game, but also who, to say it straight, has more friends in this international competition of intelligence and counterintelligence services.
What do we know about the alleged operative who was extradited from Bosnia? And what does it tell us about the way these networks operate?
Well, actually, this is an interesting part. The way the networks do operate is quite often highly that's the key word, the network. The networking part of creation and coordination of such attacks is actually absolutely crucial. I mean, it has been a part of covert operations and organizing covert operations for quite a few decades. This is the way in which covert movements and covert operations were created since at least World War II, mainly because of the fact that if you do create an organization in which the individual cells and individual operatives act on their own as independently as possible, and by having the least possible amount of knowledge about each other, then we find ourselves in the situation in which we are trying to target the operation of the organization that includes multiple almost independent cells, and just breaking one part of this chain, unfortunately, does not prevent the whole organization from operating. And so this is also one of the greatest threats of the modern covert operations. We are trying to find out about the people who are not only trained in quite effective covering their tracks, but who might also try to radicalize and recruit for their operations individuals from almost all over the world. And so the networked world, which provides us with such great opportunities for cooperation, is at the same time one of the greatest generators of the threats that might come from the least expected source.
And finally, a quick question. Allegedly, this operative was actually a professional, which has to be emphasized because they often also use so-called low-level operatives, and these apparently are expendable assets, but not this one.
Yes, and that means, but see, that's the problem with, or maybe the chance with foreign services using the professionals and the operatives that might have been known to our services. There are advantages and disadvantages to using both low-level operatives and people with least amount of experience and well-trained and versed operatives. Those who are low-level and who have least amount of experience and least amounts of, knowledge and skills usually will be unknown to us. They will have this immense asset of anonymity even in a world in which everybody knows everything about everybody else because they have the access to almost any database in the world. When you're using somebody who's well-trained, well-versed, might have been used in other operations, then you are leaving yourselves vulnerable and open to this person being recognized, being noticed by, say, for example, tracking systems, CCTVs, or monitoring systems on the borders, either common borders of the European Union or the national borders of individual states, which means that that means two things. The first one is that the target that was supposed to be hit was important enough to use the operative and also to take a chance of him being recognized.
Dr. Paulina Piasecka was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for explaining the situation. And I'm Jonasz Rewiński. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.